They say your home is your castle, but what if the villagers storm the gate with folding chairs and floral arches before sunrise? Think having an HOA is annoying? That's what happened to me. Saturday morning, 6:15 a.m., I step outside with my coffee, expecting bird song and sprinkler mist. Instead, I get a wedding tent rising like a circus in my backyard. 3 men in cargo shorts are hammering stakes into my lawn like they're planting flags at Normandy. One looks up, grins, and says, "Morning, boss. Dream Vista Events. We'll be out by Sunday." Like I was the hotel concierge and this was the ballroom. Drop a comment below, tell us where you're tuning in from. If you're into real lifestyle stories that come with plot twists, poetic justice, and just enough HOA chaos to spike your blood pressure, go on and smash that subscribe button. Tomorrow's episode? Let's just say, the tea gets hotter, the stakes get higher, and the Karens, they definitely didn't see it coming. Now, I've seen HOA madness before. I've been cited for an off-white mailbox and for having unauthorized patio furniture that looked suspiciously like every other chair in Costco. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for Janice Crowley, the HOA president, the queen bee of Lakeshore Grove Estates. If HOA power was caffeine, Janice was drinking it intravenously. She'd decided, without so much as a text, that my backyard, the one I'd poured 8 months of sweat and soil therapy into, would host her niece's wedding. No request, no heads up. Just a community event clause she pulled from a bylaws binder thicker than a Bible, and about as easy to interpret. Let me explain something about that backyard. I built it, designed it. Every drought-tolerant plant, every California poppy, every gravel path bending toward my hand-carved meditation stone, it was mine. Not metaphorically, literally. Lot 12B paid for, deeded, private property. But Janice? She insisted there was a clause in the HOA documents granting event easement rights to the back 20 feet of every home. It's standard, she said, like that made it sacred law. And honestly, Miles, your garden is just so quaint. Quaint. That word hit harder than a weed whacker to a bonsai tree. It wasn't just invasive, it was insulting. My sanctuary had been demoted to a photo backdrop, a Pinterest prop. I could feel it already. The HOA weaponization coming, the phantom citations, the passive-aggressive emails, the next-door whispers about the difficult homeowner. But this time was different. This wasn't about a trash bin being left out an extra hour. This was about ownership, respect. I wasn't just defending perennials. I was defending principle. And that's when it happened, just as I was about to call a lawyer. A ghost from my past materialized on the front porch, like a twist in a soap opera. Bianca Lowell, holding a pastry bag, wearing a smile that said, "I come in peace," but always meant, "I come for control." Bianca. My ex, the one who told me freelancing was cute but not real, the one who hated my commitment to this home, this neighborhood, this life, and now here she was, smiling like we were still on speaking terms, offering almond croissants like carbs could erase history. "Heard about the wedding thing," she said, too casual. "Thought maybe we could talk. You know, avoid a scene." A scene? There were already tents in my petunias and strangers peeing in the corner where I buried my dog's ashes. The scene had arrived. But I played polite. Took the coffee, let her talk. She mentioned she knew people at Dream Vista. She could smooth things over. She'd talk to Janice. The words slid out like butter on Teflon. But I wasn't listening to her voice. I was watching her eyes. The way they flicked toward the backyard. The stage, the flower trucks. Like she was taking inventory. That's when I knew. This wasn't coincidence. This was coordinated. She showed up like a walking cliché. Croissants in one hand, that trademark half smile that said, "I'm here to help," but really meant, "I'm here to complicate your life." Bianca Lowell, my ex, the one who insisted I needed stability, but never quite knew how to offer it herself. She wanted to play peacemaker between me and the HOA, which was funny because her idea of peace usually involved stirring the pot just enough to watch it boil over. I took the coffee, but every sip tasted like a warning sign. How convenient, right? Just as my backyard was being turned into a bridal battleground, she rolls up like a character out of a bad romantic drama. But this wasn't about nostalgia. It was about strategy. And you could almost hear the gears turning behind that sugary facade. Turns out, Bianca wasn't just an uninvited guest bearing pastries. She had ties to Sunflare's celebrations, the very company contracted to run the wedding setup. I started putting pieces together, the late-night texts, the whispered phone calls, the coincidences of seeing her car at Janice Crowley's place more times than a mailman delivers letters. If this was a chess game, Bianca was the queen, moving behind the scenes, setting traps I hadn't even spotted yet. I couldn't help but feel like I was the pawn, blindsided by forces who'd mastered the art of disguise. The kind of manipulation that feels like concern but tastes bitter in the gut. And just when I thought it couldn't get more tangled, I realized the worst was yet to come. Because manipulation hides in shadows, but money shines bright enough to blind you. Digging through HOA financial statements wasn't my idea of a good time, but desperate times call for stubborn measures. That's when I found it. Payments to H. Lowell Consulting for event coordination services. Bianca's name tied directly to the HOA's coffers. Fraud? Embezzlement? It felt like discovering your trusted neighbor's been robbing the cookie jar while smiling at your face. But this wasn't a petty theft. This was a full-blown scam dressed up in polite HOA jargon and community enhancement. And just like that, the stakes shot through the roof. It wasn't just my garden being trampled anymore. It was my trust, my peace, and my patience. What hit hardest was the betrayal, the emotional kind that cuts deeper than any legal battle. Bianca had known me, understood what I cared about, and here she was playing a double game that made me question every shared memory. How do you prepare for an enemy who once claimed to love you? The tension wasn't just about HOA rules or property lines, it was personal. It felt like a slow, relentless drip of acid eating away at everything I'd built, not just in my backyard, but inside myself. The realization that the lines between friend and foe can blur into a messy gray zone was the kind of pain that leaves you restless at night, wondering who to trust next. So yeah, the croissants were sweet, but the truth was bitter. Bianca's help was just another layer of a game designed to wear me down, confuse me, and push me out. But here's the kicker. I'm not one to fold under pressure, especially when the battle's this personal. As I sat there staring at those financial records, a new fire ignited. It was about avoiding conflict anymore. It was about uncovering the whole rotten system and setting it straight. And trust me, if you think this story's intense so far, just wait. The next chapter's going to peel back even more layers of this HOA madness you won't want to miss. Some folks throw punches, I throw footnotes. You see, when it comes to battling a HOA queenpin like Janice Crowley, there's no point in trying to out-yell her. No, you fight with the law. Specifically, the fine print hidden in dusty three-ring binders that bite back harder than any gossip at the HOA meeting. After Bianca's sugary betrayal surfaced, I knew it was time to call in an expert who spoke HOA like it was her native tongue. Leila Cantu, a real estate attorney whose reputation could make even the most crooked board members sweat through their polyester suits. Leila arrived with a stack of legal tomes thicker than my morning newspaper, and a no-nonsense glare that said, "Let's tear this HOA house down clause by clause." We dove into every covenant rule and municipal ordinance governing Lakeshore Grove estates like detectives hunting a cold case. Turns out, these HOA contracts are like riddles wrapped in legal jargon, vague, contradictory, and designed to trap the unwary. But that was our advantage. Every ambiguous sentence, every loophole was another arrow in our quiver. Janice's event rights clause? Slippery, but not bulletproof. Meanwhile, Janice decided to switch gears. Instead of dealing directly with the law, she unleashed what I started calling her violation volley. I'm talking about petty, absurd charges, trash bin placed incorrectly, mailbox rust beyond acceptable limits, and wait for it, my flamingo lawn ornament labeled an unauthorized decorative element. I couldn't help but laugh, imagining a tiny HOA inspector sneaking around at night with a rust meter and a flamingo black. But behind the humor was a clear message. We can make your life miserable, one ridiculous complaint at a time. Each violation came with a $200 0 cents fine and a 72-hour fix-it deadline. The HOA had weaponized tedium. Layla was quick to point out the absurdity. "This isn't enforcement," she said. "It's harassment dressed in bylaws. For every violation Janice tossed my way, Layla had a counter, a procedural misstep here, a missing notice there." Slowly, the tide began to turn. We documented everything. Every email, every notice, every late-night phone call demanding compliance. This wasn't about a garden anymore. It was about power, control, and standing firm against a bureaucracy built to bully. And while I was busy fending off the flamingo fiasco, the real battle was brewing beneath the surface. One afternoon, I got a message from an unknown number. No name, just a simple tip. "Check who signs the HOA checks. You'll find gold." That cryptic note felt like the opening line of a thriller. Suddenly, my backyard drama transformed into a financial investigation. If Janice was using HOA funds to fuel personal vendettas and private parties, I wanted to know, and I wanted proof. With Layla's guidance, I filed formal requests for financial records, the kind most homeowners never bother with because, well, taxes and HOA meetings aren't exactly thrilling topics. But what we uncovered was worse than I'd imagined. Payments made to Dream Vista events disguised as community enhancement, totaling thousands of dollars. And buried in the spreadsheets was a suspicious payment to Lowell Consulting, Bianca's name, clearly linked to HOA funds. The pieces started clicking into place. This wasn't just a garden squabble or a case of HOA overreach. It was a carefully orchestrated scheme to siphon money from unsuspecting neighbors. I remember sitting there, phone in hand, staring at the numbers like they were a betrayal spelled out in ink and spreadsheets. Money that should have gone to fixing neighborhood sidewalks or maintaining the park was funneled into private weddings and consulting fees for my ex. The audacity was staggering. And yet, the cruelest sting wasn't the theft, it was the deception. The system was designed to hide these abuses behind community trust and paperwork nobody reads. That's the HOA's real weapon, turning neighbors against each other while lining their own pockets. Meanwhile, Janice escalated. The violation notices multiplied. Suddenly it wasn't just my mailbox and flamingo. Now it was the potted plants on my porch, the color of my front door, even the height of my grass down to the 1/10 of an inch. If it was trivial, it was on the list. The message was clear: conform or pay. I joked to Layla that I might need to send my lawnmower to the HOA board for inspection. But beneath the humor, the pressure was mounting. Every fine was a drain on my wallet and my sanity. Yet, through this storm, I felt something shifting. Knowledge is power, they say, and every day I learned more about fighting back. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about standing up for every homeowner who'd been pushed around, ignored, or silenced. I started hearing from neighbors in whispers, sharing their own stories of petty harassment and quiet resistance. It was like we were all pieces of a puzzle coming together, realizing we weren't alone. And that gave me strength. But the real game changer came with that anonymous tip. "Check who signs the HOA checks," it said. That was the thread we needed to pull, because once you follow the money, you don't just find theft, you find motive, collusion, and the faces behind the curtain. I wasn't just fighting a power-hungry HOA president anymore. I was about to uncover an entire web of deception that reached far beyond my backyard. And as I prepared to dive deeper into this financial maze, I realized the war wasn't just for my garden. It was for the truth, for justice, and for every quiet homeowner who ever felt powerless. The next chapter? It's where the paper trail leads us into the darkest corners of HOA corruption. And trust me, it's a journey you'll want to follow. Turns out my nosy neighbor wasn't nosy at all. Just a retired school principal with hearing aids so powerful they could pick up a whisper in a hurricane. Mrs. Edith Harper, a spry 74-year-old with a knack for detective work that would make Sherlock Holmes proud, invited me over one afternoon. She said, "Miles, I've been watching Janice for years. She thinks she runs this place like a queen, but every queen's got a secret, and I've got proof." What followed was a masterclass in patience and stealth. A folder bursting with audio recordings, photos, and HOA meeting transcripts that laid bare a saga of systematic abuse disguised as community upkeep. You'd think the quietest lady on the block wouldn't pack this kind of punch. But that's exactly what made it poetic justice. She opened the folder like it was Pandora's box. There were photos of Janice slipping envelopes to contractors, receipts for community events that suspiciously lined her own pockets, and detailed notes on board meetings where she twisted votes to crush anyone who dared disagree. The transcripts painted a picture so absurd it almost felt like satire. Rules changing overnight, neighbors fined for excessive laughter, and strategic inspections timed to catch residents off guard. The real kicker? Edith had audio proof of Janice bragging about breaking homeowners one by one until they knew their place. You couldn't make this up. Here was a woman who ruled with petty tyrannies, and her reign was about to end thanks to the quietest weapon in the neighborhood, a hearing aid. Then Edith pressed play on a recording that made my blood run cold. It was Janice and Bianca, my ex, hatching a plan to ruin me professionally if I refused to back down. Bianca's voice oozed fake sweetness as she painted me as unreasonable, while Janice's tone was cold and calculating, promising to cut me off at the knees. Listening to that was like watching a slow-motion train wreck. You knew disaster was coming, but it still hit like a gut punch. They weren't just bullying me over a garden anymore. This was full-blown psychological warfare. They wanted to isolate me, discredit me, make sure I lost everything for daring to stand up. But it didn't stop there. I woke up one morning to find my irrigation system completely destroyed. Not just a broken sprinkler head or a minor leak. Pipes slashed, control panels smashed, wires cut, like someone was sending a message in Morse code. And right in the middle of my garden, a sign planted like a taunt. Property of Lakeshore HOA. Authorized personnel only. Trespassers will be prosecuted. That wasn't vandalism. That was a declaration of ownership, stamped with the audacity of someone who thought they could rewrite the rules on my land. It felt like being told, "You're a stranger in your own home." The subtle terror of that sign hit deeper than any HOA fine ever could. This was a turning point. The destruction was meant to intimidate, to silence me with fear, but here's the irony. Sometimes destruction lights a fire. The combination of Edith's evidence and the vandalism fueled my resolve. I wasn't just protecting plants anymore. I was fighting for respect, justice, and a community that deserved better than a dictator in tennis shoes. Edith reminded me, "They think you're just a nuisance, but we're the ones holding the receipt." That quiet confidence from a woman who had lived through decades of battles was infectious. It gave me strength to know that sometimes the most powerful resistance is the one no one sees coming. Looking back, the whole situation was a study in contrasts. A frail-looking old lady with a hearing aid outsmarting the sharpest HOA sharks. A vandalized garden that became a battleground for justice. And a community torn apart by petty power plays now standing on the edge of change. Edith's recordings weren't just proof, they were a rallying cry. The HOA queen's crown was slipping, and it wasn't because of grand gestures or loud protests, but because of quiet, steady determination, and a little old lady who refused to be ignored. And as I walked past that defaced garden sign, my mind was already racing ahead. The next battle loomed large, because this wasn't just a fight over irrigation pipes or floral arrangements anymore. It was a full-scale war for control, truth, and dignity. And trust me, the next chapter is where the bulldozers roll in and the HOA's facade finally cracks. You're not going to want to miss how this one ends. When they buried my garden, they forgot I know how to unearth more than dirt. That sign in my yard, The property of Lakeshore HOA declaration wasn't just vandalism, it was a challenge. So I did what any sane person with a landscape architect's pride would do. I called in favors, rented a bulldozer, and prepared to send a very clear message. Not a wrecking ball out of spite, but a legal, righteous reclaiming of what was mine, because sometimes the only language bullies understand is heavy machinery with a permit. By mid-morning, that ridiculous wedding setup was meeting its match. Tables, chairs, string lights, and even the portable dance floor, all carefully dismantled under the watchful eyes of me, Eli, my contractor friend who owed me a favor, and Layla, my lawyer with a smile sharp enough to cut through HOA bull. Watching the wedding arch come down felt like peeling off layers of a scam one plank at a time, and honestly, it was deeply satisfying. But the real entertainment was still to come. Janice Crowley appeared like a storm cloud on my driveway, her designer yoga pants making a mockery of her thunderous tirade. "You can't do this. It's community property," she screamed, phone already out, fingers poised to dial 911. Eli, calm as ever, replied, "Ma'am, this is private property. None of this setup was authorized." Her furious sputtering was almost comical, like watching a reality show where the villain gets outplayed by the underdog with dirt on their boots and a bulldozer at their side. The police arrived within 15 minutes, 2 officers who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else but the middle of an HOA meltdown. Officer Martinez reviewed my property deed, the destroyed irrigation, and the unauthorized sign as though he were reading the morning headlines. Officer Chen grilled Janice about permits, permissions, and proof of consent, all of which she spectacularly failed to produce. Layla seized the moment, laying down legal facts and HOA regulations with the precision of a seasoned prosecutor. Watching Janice's confident facade crumble was a lesson in poetic justice, the HOA queen reduced to a frustrated bystander in yoga pants on her own street. As each piece of wedding gear was loaded onto the curb, a wave of relief washed over me. This was more than reclaiming a garden. It was reclaiming respect, dignity, and the right to say no to bullies wielding power they didn't earn. I caught Edith's smile from across the street, quiet, triumphant. The kind of smile only someone who's seen decades of battles can give. It was a reminder that sometimes justice arrives on quiet feet, but it lands with thunder. Just when I thought the fight had settled, the night had other plans. At exactly 10 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from a neighbor, "You might want to look outside," and sure enough, pounding bass and murmurs filled the air. I looked out to see groups of people sneaking into my yard, setting up battery-powered speakers, string lights, and a makeshift altar. An illegal midnight wedding was happening on my property. Janice and Bianca hadn't given up. They were escalating. The battle lines had shifted into darkness, and the drama was far from over. If you think this sounds wild so far, just wait. The next chapter is when the fireworks really start, and the HOA's fragile empire begins to crumble in ways nobody saw coming. They thought they'd marry under string lights and moonlight, an intimate moment wrapped in soft music and promises. What they got instead? Subpoenas under starlight. That illegal midnight wedding I caught? It quickly turned from a romantic escapade into the most embarrassing HOA spectacle this side of Lakeshore Grove Estates. As the band tuned up and guests mingled, Edith, ever the neighborhood watch queen, pulled out her portable speaker and blasted those recordings, the ones that revealed Janice and Bianca's dirty little secrets, over the crowd like a megaphone announcing the end of an era. The effect was electric. Conversations froze mid-cheers. Glasses stopped clinking. Guests exchanged bewildered glances, some clutching their phones, others whispering apologies to Avery, the poor bride who'd been caught in the crossfire of this suburban war. People started drifting away, like leaves carried by a sudden breeze, not wanting to be part of a celebration now tainted by betrayal and fraud. The romantic night quickly dissolved into a public reckoning, and the only thing being tied up was the truth, wound tight and impossible to ignore. Then Eli stepped forward. My contractor friend turned forensic accountant for the day, holding a folder thick with damning numbers and invoices. His voice carried across the thinning crowd as he explained how nearly $25,000, 0 cents, of HOA funds had been siphoned off, funneled into Janice's private projects and Bianca's consulting fees. "This isn't just poor bookkeeping," he said. "It's embezzlement, and it's been happening for years." The shock rippled through the neighbors, turning frustration into outrage. Phones whipped out, lawyers were called, and a neighborhood that once whispered in private now demanded answers out loud. The police returned, this time better prepared, with statements and evidence stacked against Janice like a house of cards about to collapse. The HOA board, sensing the tide turning, scrambled to distance themselves, demanding Janice's resignation and threatening investigations that might end more than just her HOA presidency. Watching the mighty fall is a slow-motion spectacle, like seeing a statue crumble because someone finally called out the crack. For Janice, those cracks were now impossible to ignore. Avery, the young bride who never wanted this drama, approached me days later with a surprising request. She asked if I'd design a real wedding venue in the community park, a space open to everyone, without the hidden agendas and corruption that had poisoned her original ceremony. It was the kind of gesture that felt like turning wounds into wisdom. My garden, which had been trampled and torn apart, was healing, and now Avery wanted to help the whole community heal with a place designed for genuine celebration. Sometimes the hardest battles forge the strongest hope. As my garden slowly recovered, it became a symbol, not just of survival, but of defiance. Neighbors who once kept their frustrations quiet now stopped me on the street, sharing stories of standing up to their own HOA nightmares. Referrals for landscaping projects started rolling in, but the real victory was quieter. I helped spark change in a place that desperately needed it. Because standing your ground isn't just about winning the fight, it's about inspiring others to fight their own battles. Looking back on all this, I realized the battle wasn't just about a garden or even a crooked HOA president. It was about standing up when the system tries to silence you, about knowing your rights and refusing to be bullied by those who think power gives them the right to trample on others. It's about community, imperfect, messy, but worth fighting for. And it's about hope, that even in the darkest moments, a few determined voices can spark real change. My garden's scars remind me of the struggle, but they also tell a story of resilience, justice, and reclaiming what's yours. If this story struck a chord with you, if you've ever felt pushed around, underestimated, or just plain fed up with the small tyrants in your life, drop a comment below. I want to hear where you're watching from, your own stories of standing tall, and what you'd do if you were in my shoes. Don't forget to like this video if you believe standing up matters, and hit that subscribe button with a bell turned on so you won't miss the next wild, true-to-life story coming your way. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: sometimes the most peaceful solution is to face the fight head-on and come out stronger on the other side. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.